The mid-19th century British landscape thrummed with the nascent energy of an industrializing nation, yet its recreational pursuits often remained rooted in a wild, unbridled past. Across muddy fields and cobbled grounds, a chaotic spectacle unfolded, beloved by many, understood by few. This was football, or rather, a myriad of localized games, each town, each school, each patch of grass boasting its own idiosyncratic interpretation of the sport. There were no universal boundaries, no agreed-upon methods of scoring, no consistent understanding of what constituted a foul. Hands might be used freely in one village, while another strictly forbade their touch. The ball, a leather sphere often, misshapen and heavy, moved through throngs of players in a swirling, physical scrum, governed more by local tradition and raw instinct than any codified law. It was a boisterous, often brutal affair, exhilarating in its unpredictability but utterly impenetrable to anyone beyond its immediate participants. Within this sprawling tapestry of local custom, a quiet intellectual hub, the ancient university, city of Cambridge, nurtured a different kind of ambition. Its hallowed halls and verdant courts, usually associated with scholarly pursuits and the pursuit of abstract knowledge, also played host to youthful exuberance. Here, amongst students grappling with classics and mathematics, the desire for physical exertion, for the release of spirited competition, was just as potent. They, like their peers across the country, engaged in their own versions of the game, a blend of various school traditions they had brought with them from Eton, Rugby, Winchester, and Harrow. Each former student arrived with a deeply ingrained, often fiercely defended, set of rules from their individual alma mater, leading to inevitable clashes and disputes on the university's expansive commons. The frustration was palpable, a passion for the game was universal, yet its very practice was hampered by incessant disagreement. Matches would devolve into endless arguments over what was permissible, what constituted a fair challenge, or how a goal could legitimately be scored. The joy of play was frequently eclipsed by the exasperation of inconsistency. It was an intellectual problem masquerading as a physical one, a challenge that, in its very essence, called for the application of reason and systematic thought. The informal, often violent, nature of these contests underscored a growing need for structure, or a common language of play that could transcend regional loyalties and schoolyard rivalries. This simmering discontent, fueled by a collective love for the game and an inherent collegiate drive for order, would find its crucible in Cambridge. It was here, amidst the spires and scholarly quietude, that a group of students, perhaps unknowingly, set out to achieve something profound. Their aim was not to invent a new game, but to harmonize an existing, disparate collection of practices into a cohesive whole. They sought to distill the essence of fair play, to define the boundaries of legitimate competition, and to forge a set of principles that could govern the beautiful chaos they so cherished. What emerged from their deliberations was more than just a list of prohibitions and permissions. It was a foundational blueprint, an attempt to bring intellectual rigor to physical expression. The story of how these young men, armed with little more than a shared passion and a common sense of frustration, managed to lay the groundwork for what would become the world's most popular sport is a testament to the power of shared vision and collaborative effort. It speaks to the quiet revolutions that often begin in unexpected places, driven by the simplest of needs. Their endeavor, born of practical necessity on the university pitches, would eventually ripple outwards, providing the essential framework for a national game, and ultimately, a global phenomenon. The very idea of a unified sport, played under a single set of understood regulations, owed its genesis to these determined students, whose efforts in 1848 would prove pivotal, establishing the crucial precursor for the formalization of the sport through the Football Association in 1863. These young men, gathering on the expansive fields of Parker's Piece, were not just any students. They represented the elite of British society, drawn from the nation's most prestigious public schools. Their formative years had been steeped in a culture where physical exertion and competitive games were deemed essential for character development, a crucial counterbalance to rigorous academic study. Each arrived in Cambridge carrying not just a trunk of books, but also an ingrained allegiance to the particular football traditions of their alma mater, from the close-knit scrums and handling of rugby school to the wide-open dribbling and kicking. Prevalent at Eton or Winchester, the very fabric of their athletic understanding was deeply localized, a mosaic of differing philosophies and regulations. Consider for a moment the intellectual landscape of their upbringing. At schools like Charterhouse or Harrow, a distinct emphasis was placed on the dribbling game, where the ball was advanced primarily with the feet, and handling was largely forbidden. Conversely, the graduates of rugby and similar institutions were accustomed to a more robust, often chaotic, style that permitted carrying the ball and tackling opponents directly. This fundamental divergence created an immediate challenge. Upon their arrival at the university, their passion for the game was undeniable, yet the very act of playing together frequently dissolved into a contest of conflicting customs rather than a unified athletic pursuit. Furthermore, the Victorian era itself imbued these students with a particular sense of purpose and order. There was a burgeoning societal belief in the power of structured recreation, not merely as a pastime, but as a vehicle for moral training and the inculcation of fair play. This concept, deeply embedded in the public school ethos, stressed integrity, sportsmanship, and adherence to agreed-upon rules, even in the face of heated competition. It was this underlying philosophical framework, cultivated during their adolescence, that provided the mental and ethical foundation for their later endeavors to standardize the game. They weren't simply seeking to resolve disputes, they were striving to elevate the sport to make it a more effective tool for building character and fostering camaraderie. Moreover, their academic pursuits within the university further sharpened their capacity for systematic thought and logical deduction. As students of classics, mathematics, law, and philosophy, they were constantly engaged in the analysis of complex systems, the construction of coherent arguments, and the pursuit of precise definitions. This intellectual rigor, honed in lecture halls and libraries, naturally extended to their extracurricular interests. The problem of disparate football rules was, in essence, a logical puzzle, a challenge in codification that demanded the same analytical precision they applied to their studies. Imagine the intellectual exercise, dissecting existing practices, identifying commonalities, and then articulating clear, unambiguous principles that could govern action on the field. Consequently, the confluence of these influences, school traditions, a shared commitment to athletic character building, and the intellectual discipline fostered by university life created a unique environment ripe for innovation. It was not merely an act of convenience, but a profound attempt to rationalize and universalize a beloved pastime. This collective background fostered an environment where the creation of a unified set of rules was seen not as a concession, but as a necessary step towards the game's true potential. It was an undertaking rooted in a deep understanding of both the practicalities of play and the broader societal values of the time, propelling them towards a solution that would transcend their immediate collegiate needs. In the wake of this recognition that a unified system was paramount, a pivotal assembly took shape. Students from various colleges, driven by a shared vision for a coherent game, convened in the hallowed chambers of Trinity College. It was here, in 1848, within rooms echoing with centuries of academic discourse, that the true test of their collaborative spirit began. The atmosphere was charged, not with animosity, but with the fervent conviction each participant held for their own school's interpretation of football. Imagine the scene: young men, some barely out of their teens, others nearing graduation, gathered around a table, maps of their respective traditions firmly etched in their minds. However, the path to consensus proved anything but smooth. The initial discussions quickly exposed the deep schisms inherited from their diverse athletic backgrounds. One of the most contentious points revolved around the use of hands. Students from schools like rugby, accustomed to a robust game where carrying the ball was not only permitted but central to strategy, found themselves at odds with those from Eton or Harrow, who viewed any handling of the sphere as anathema, insisting on a game played exclusively with the feet. This wasn't merely a minor rule discrepancy, it represented a fundamental divergence in the very philosophy of the sport, a clash between a running, physical contest and a more strategic, kicking-oriented endeavor. Moreover, the very act of formalizing concepts like offside presented its own labyrinthine challenges. Different schools applied wildly varying interpretations of when a player was considered out of play, leading to constant stoppages and disputes. On the field, some traditions allowed players to be offside only if they were ahead of the ball, while others imposed stricter limitations, requiring multiple opponents between the player and the goal. Attempting to reconcile these views demanded meticulous articulation and a willingness to cede ground on deeply ingrained habits. The debates extended to the very nature of tackling and physical engagement. Should hacking, kicking an opponent's shins be allowed as a legitimate tactic, as it was in some schools, or was it an egregious violation of fair play, bordering on outright assault? These were not abstract theoretical exercises. They were practical considerations with direct implications for player safety and the game's overall character. Consequently, heated discussions often punctuated these early sessions. Compromise became the bedrock upon which any progress could be built. No single school's customs could entirely dictate the new framework. Instead, a hybrid model, drawing elements from the most widely accepted practices, began to take shape. This required a remarkable degree of intellectual humility and a pragmatic recognition that a universally playable game necessitated concessions from all sides. The students meticulously debated each clause, weighing its impact on flow, fairness, and fundamental spirit of competition. They grappled with defining the size of the playing area, the number of players on a side, and the precise methods for restarting play after an infringement or when the ball left the field. Beyond the ideological divides, practical considerations also posed hurdles. How would these newly drafted rules be disseminated and enforced among a transient student population? Would older students, set in their ways, accept the changes imposed by a committee of their peers? The very act of writing down these rules, transforming oral tradition into codified law, was a significant step, but ensuring adherence presented its own set of trials. Early attempts to play by the evolving rules often highlighted unforeseen ambiguities or unintended consequences, necessitating immediate revisions and further discussions. This iterative process, characterized by both spirited debate and subsequent on-field trials, refined the document, sharpening its language and clarifying its intent. Ultimately, what emerged from these crucible moments was not just a set of regulations, but a testament to the power of negotiation and shared purpose, laying the essential groundwork for a game that could transcend regional peculiarities and embrace a broader, more inclusive future. With the internal consensus forged, the Cambridge students understood that their meticulously crafted framework represented more than a mere collegiate agreement. It was a potential solution to a national quandary. Their next crucial step involved translating these oral and debated understandings into a tangible, accessible document. Consequently, the newly refined Cambridge rules were formally committed to paper, likely disseminated as a printed leaflet or pamphlet among the university colleges and perhaps even sent to their former public schools. This act of publication was a watershed moment, elevating the rules from a localized campus understanding to a codified standard that could travel and be replicated. The immediate impact, while not universally transformative, was nonetheless significant. Imagine the novelty to teams, perhaps from different towns or even different university colleges that had previously found common ground only through endless pre-match negotiations, could now step onto a pitch with a shared understanding of the game's fundamental principles. This newfound clarity dramatically reduced the friction that had long plagued inter-club matches. The playing field, once a chaotic battleground of competing customs, began to transform into a space governed by predictable, acknowledged laws. Players could focus on skill and strategy rather than constantly disputing every challenge or every touch of the ball. Furthermore, the very existence of a standardized code from such a respected institution like Cambridge provided a powerful precedent. Other burgeoning football clubs and nascent sporting associations across England began to take notice. The Cambridge rules served as a practical blueprint, demonstrating that a unified system was not only desirable but achievable. While not all adopted the rules verbatim, many utilized them as a foundational text, a starting point for their own discussions and refinements. This ripple effect was crucial. It ignited a broader conversation about the necessity of uniform regulations, fostering a collective aspiration for a national game rather than a fragmented collection of regional pastimes. Consider, for instance, a team from the industrial north encountering a team from the agricultural south. The Cambridge rules offered the first truly viable bridge across such divides, allowing for competitive, meaningful encounters that transcended local traditions. This period also marked a subtle yet profound shift in the very perception of football. No longer solely a boisterous, often brutal, outlet for youthful energy, it began to acquire an aura of respectability and organization. The formalization inherent in the Cambridge rules appealed to a Victorian society increasingly valuing order, discipline, and structured leisure. Governing bodies, still embryonic, recognized that a codified game was far more appealing to spectators, easier to manage, and more conducive to the development of consistent skill sets among players. The ability to articulate what was and was not permissible, to define fouls and offsides with precision, allowed for a more strategic and less arbitrary form of play, enhancing its appeal to a wider audience. The personal breakthroughs for the original student creators were equally noteworthy. They had embarked on a task born of local frustration, yet their solution proved to possess far greater utility. Their efforts, initially focused on simplifying their own recreational pursuits, inadvertently laid the intellectual groundwork for a sport that would eventually captivate millions. This experience likely instilled in them a deeper understanding of collaborative problem-solving and the power of establishing clear, equitable guidelines. They witnessed firsthand how their academic rigor, applied to a seemingly trivial pursuit, could yield practical, far-reaching benefits, establishing a legacy far beyond their immediate collegiate years. Their commitment to clarity and fairness, born on the university pitches, had now offered a genuine pathway for football to evolve from a disparate array of local skirmishes into a more cohesive and universally understood athletic endeavor, propelling it towards a future of widespread acceptance and popularity. Reflecting on this journey so far, one cannot help but discern a powerful testament to the human impulse for order, even amidst the most spirited expressions of recreation. What began as a vibrant, yet often fractious, tapestry of local customs and deeply ingrained athletic habits eventually yielded to a more profound aspiration: the forging of a common language. The very act of play, once a crucible of endless debate and conflicting interpretations, was crying out for a unifying vision. It was a yearning for clarity that transcended the simple desire for victory, pointing instead towards a more equitable and universally understood arena of competition. Consider the intricate dance required to reconcile deeply held convictions, each rooted in a distinct past. The friction born of disparate understandings of fundamental engagement, of how a sphere could legitimately be propelled, or when a player truly influenced the flow of action, presented a formidable challenge. Yet, within this crucible of contention, a remarkable synthesis began to take shape. It was a painstaking process of intellectual arbitration, where the abstract principles of fairness and the practicalities of physical exertion converged. This period demanded not just ingenuity, but a profound capacity for compromise, an acknowledgement that the collective good of the game necessitated a relinquishing of individual or localized prerogatives. What emerged from these deliberations was far more than a mere collection of regulations. It was a foundational charter, a meticulously articulated framework designed to bring coherence to chaos. The shift from ephemeral custom, passed down through generations of play, to enduring script marked a pivotal transformation. This codification provided the essential scaffolding upon which a truly national, and eventually international, pastime could be built. It offered a common lexicon, a shared understanding that allowed disparate groups to engage in meaningful contests, fostering a sense of unity across geographical and institutional divides that had previously seemed insurmountable. The resonance of this foundational effort extended far beyond the immediate confines of its genesis. It provided a compelling demonstration of how structured principles could elevate a popular diversion into a respected institution. The very act of defining the parameters of engagement, of setting clear boundaries for competition, imbued the game with a new layer of dignity and appeal. It signaled a maturation, a progression from a purely instinctual pursuit to one governed by thoughtful design and shared consensus. This transformation underscored a deeper societal movement towards organized leisure and the cultivation of character through disciplined endeavor. As we pivot towards the final reflection, the implications of this early architecture continue to unfold. The quiet determination to bring rational order to a beloved game set in motion a chain of events whose profound impact reverberates across continents and generations. It speaks to the enduring power of a shared vision, the capacity for collaboration to transcend deeply entrenched differences, and the transformative potential of a simple, yet elegantly constructed, idea. The journey from localized skirmishes to a globally embraced spectacle finds its critical inflection point in these early foundational efforts, illustrating how the desire for a coherent framework can ignite an unforeseen trajectory of growth and universal appeal. The path laid down in those early days became the fertile ground for an evolution far grander than its architects could have ever envisioned, setting the stage for a phenomenon that would capture the collective imagination of the world. The arc of history often bends through seemingly small, localized acts of ingenuity, their true significance only becoming apparent in the vast sweep of time. What began on the sprawling green common of Parker's Piece amidst the spirited yet often fractious contests of young university men, was more than a mere attempt to settle playground disputes. It was an intuitive grasp of a profound human need, the desire for shared understanding, for a common language that could transform chaotic passion into structured beauty. The disparate, often violent, interpretations of football that crisscrossed Britain in the mid-19th century represented a fundamental barrier to the game's growth. Without a unified framework, the sport remained fragmented, its potential for widespread appeal and sophisticated play forever tethered to local whim and arbitrary custom. The students of Cambridge, drawing from their diverse public school backgrounds and the intellectual rigor of their academic pursuits, embarked on an endeavor that transcended simple recreation. Their meticulous debates, a painstaking process of reconciling contradictory rules regarding handling, offside, and physical contact, constituted an act of intellectual courage. They sought to distill the essence of fair competition, to codify the very spirit of play into a set of principles that could be universally applied and understood. This pioneering framework, born of necessity and intellectual discipline, became the foundational blueprint, an unseen scaffold upon which the edifice of modern football would eventually rise. It was a testament to the power of collaboration, demonstrating that true progress often emerges not from individual brilliance, but from a collective commitment to rational discourse and compromise. The ripple effect of these Cambridge rules was slow but inexorable. Once committed to paper, they offered a tangible solution, a beacon of clarity in a sea of confusion. Other nascent football clubs and associations across the burgeoning industrial landscape of England began to take notice. The Cambridge Principles provided a compelling precedent, proving that a unified game was not merely an idealistic dream but a practical possibility. They provided the essential vocabulary for interclub matches, enabling meaningful competition beyond the confines of local tradition. This gradual adoption, the organic spread of a standardized code, laid the groundwork for the sport's formalization. It directly inspired the formation of the Football Association in 1863, transforming a collection of regional pastimes into a cohesive national sport, poised for even greater expansion. The profound legacy of the Cambridge Rules lies not just in the specific regulations they established, many of which have evolved over time, but in the enduring idea they championed, that rules, far from being restrictive, are in fact liberating. By establishing clear boundaries, they opened up infinite possibilities for strategic depth, skillful execution, and universal participation. They allowed the game to transcend its origins as a rough-and-tumble local affair, elevating it to a respected institution capable of fostering sportsmanship, discipline, and a shared sense of community. This act of codification transformed football from a mere physical outlet into a global cultural phenomenon, a universal language understood and cherished by billions across continents. Today, as stadiums worldwide erupt in cheers and millions gather to witness the beautiful game, the echoes of those Cambridge student debates resonate. The global tapestry of football, vibrant and complex, is woven with the threads of foresight and collaboration laid down in 1848. It stands as a powerful reminder that the most impactful revolutions often begin quietly, driven by the simple, yet profound, human desire to bring order to chaos, to create shared understanding, and to build enduring frameworks that allow passion to flourish universally. The true practice of this legacy continues, not just on the pitches, but in every endeavor where diverse individuals come together, seeking common ground to build something greater than themselves.